We're now going to make the scrubs trousers. We have only got, as you will see here, 4 pieces for the trousers and 2 pockets. The tricky bit with trousers is making sure you get a back and a front together and a back and a front together, and that they are opposites. You don't end up sewing 2 that look identical. Particularly with this double-sided fabric, you just have to use sort of the little grey cells and make sure you've got them correctly aligned in the right order. So we're going to take, the first one's quite easy. We take one back piece, which is the longer one, and one front piece, which is the slightly shorter one. And you can see that when you put them together, they're similar but not exactly the same. Now, for me, I am now going to sew on my overlocker. For me, this is much, much faster than it is using a standard sewing machine, which I sometimes end up shouting, "Will you please sew faster?" at it. If you haven't got an overlocker, not a problem. You zigzag and then you stitch together. Or you can stitch together and then zigzag on this in this particular sequence, because they're outside hems, outside seams, and they don't have to be pressed flat. So you can stitch together and then zigzag, but you will have to zigzag if you don't overlock. So here we have the back and the front pieces, and the seam is going to be on the outside, which means when we turn it, this is going to be the left leg. Okay, so I'm making the left leg to begin with. Because I'm using my overlocker, I'm not going to pin. You should really tack for an overlocker. If you're going to use an overlocker and pin, there is a very important thing. You put your pin way from the needles and the plate. There is nothing more guaranteed to kill an overlocker than having a pin going underneath the foot pedal. So let's see how we go. If you haven't used an overlocker before, the principle is that this little knife here cuts the edge off. Behind it you've got 2 needles which do a locking stitch, double row of stitches, and underneath there are threads that come across that loop round as you go. You just lift the edge, the foot stays down all the time, you lift the foot, place it underneath, and then press your foot pedal and you go fast. Let's stop and just have a look. You'll see that the edge I have there has got 2 threads stitching it down and 2 loops going over the top. Doing detailed work with an overlocker, you tack the pieces of fabric together, you don't pin them. At the end of your sewing, you just keep going for a little bit and then snip off the thread. Here we have our back with our front facing that way. With our next piece, we go to the other leg. We are going to get our front and our back lying on top of it, facing in the opposite direction. Then we know we have got 2 legs as opposed to 2 identical legs, 2 different legs. Okay, I'm now going to overlock this seam here all the way down top to bottom. I'll see you when I've done it. So you'll see we have our 2 legs ready and prepared. Those are the opposite ways round. Now, with this pair of trousers, I'm not actually going to put the back pockets on. I've discovered that there are some hospitals and some clinics that don't like staff to have trouser pockets of any sort, whether side pockets or back pockets. So this is a pair for somebody who doesn't want any pockets on. But the principle is the same as we use on the top, so just have a quick look at that video. Top stitch the top down, press the sides in, and then top stitch them onto the back of the trouser, which is the wider one here, just on your bum there. Very simple, very straightforward. But we're not going to do that at the moment. What we're going to do now is stitch these trousers together. Now, a friend of mine had a problem recently when she had stitched it all the wrong way round. So just engage your brain again, think. We're going to stitch the back to the back and the front to the front. Another principle is by stitching the inside leg, then tucking it in one leg inside the other. But for what we are doing today, it's much quicker to do this. You find the two seams that match, which are going to be at the front of your body. And particularly when we're using an overlocker, we can just whiz round really quickly. We match the seam like this, and we stitch round. So from the top, down the front, all the way, taking a little bit off the edge. When we get to a curve, we straighten the fabric and curve it round. Pull it out. And there we have the front, stitch the front. We are going to be tying these, the ends of these seams into the waistband and into the legs, so we don't have to worry about knotting these little threads together, which you do on some pieces of work with an overlocker. So now we've got something that looks a bit like a skirt. So now we have what looks like a skirt with our two fronts joined together, our legs joined together, and now we're going to go round and we're going to sew the back seam from the waistband down to the crutch. We are making sure all this time on this double-sided fabric that all the seams are facing the same way, i.e. outwards. If you make a mistake and sew one inside, you'll end up with a very complicated garment to unpick. We have now sewn all our legs together. We have a back and we have a front. What we're going to do now on our overlocker, or using zigzags followed by stitching together, or by stitching together and then zigzags, it doesn't really matter. We are now going to stitch from the bottom of one leg all the way up the middle to the join and all the way down the other leg. You've seen me do this before. Come back to me when it's finished. There. We now have a fantastic pair of trousers in a very short space of time. Incidentally, I know they're very long for many nurses and people going into care homes. However, we also have many men who want to wear them, and they are quite a lot taller and a lot bigger.